it's 4020 not live. Phil Kaplan is here, as are Gary and Gemma Carter. Back for the first time, I think, since the Challenge Cup.
Since
Yes,
the week before Salford went to
yeah.
The glory days.
Somebody didn't get the memo about wearing red, and you wouldn't think it would be the Salford fans.
Oh,
I know, yeah.
Well, they're feeling blue now, the Salford fans, because they're bottom of the table.
Are we?
Yeah.
Are we? Oh, sorry, I have been paying attention, honest.
2 weeks in, Phil loves the league table after a week, let alone 2 weeks. Leeds have won a game, though.
We shouldn't get league tables until 4 or 5 games into the season. We've always said that.
Should we start with Daryl Powell? Because he's off to Warrington.
I'm not starting with him. I reckon he could take me easy.
3 weeks for a press conference. It takes that long. I love you, Dad.
According to something John Davidson wrote, he won't be the only person leaving Castleford to go to Warrington. He wrote that about a month ago. But this is not shocking news, is it?
Depends who you're thinking as in not the only person to leave Castleford for Warrington. Are we talking player or staff member?
Well, I think from John's stories, I think one of each, perhaps.
Certainly, I think a staff member. Player, I'm not so sure. I think Warrington want the player, but I'm not sure the player wants to go.
Which is interesting. But Daryl Powell moving to Warrington, I guess it's been kind of, as soon as Steve Price announced he was leaving and Daryl Powell announced he was leaving Castleford, it kind of made sense.
Are both coaches going to stick it out for the remainder of the season? I know, like, with all the will in the world, the idea is lovely, but do we really think that that's going to happen, Phil?
I think the important thing is that both clubs have got a big turnover of staff coming. And by announcing it early, there's absolutely no doubt that Daryl will get involved with who he wants at Warrington and who he wants to bring in at Warrington. So I think that's an advantage to have that out in the open. They're both, on the basis of what we saw last week, playing well enough for the coaches to stay where they are. Daryl actually seems really relaxed now that it's all out there, and he's a jovial fella off the camera anyway. But sometimes he can be a bit taciturn on it. But he seems to be trying very hard to be relaxed and enjoy the year for what it is. I think he'd want to see it out at Castleford. The only doubt for me is that if Warrington play more like they did in week 1 than they did in week 2, will there be a push from the Warrington board to hasten it? But I think they'll stick where they are, and then nobody's paying out any deals to end contracts early, and everybody knows where they sit. There's going to be real pressure on Daryl in this job. I think when he took Castleford, it was the dream scenario for him. It was his hometown club. They were on the crest of a slump when he took over, and immediately he could institute what he wanted to do, how he wanted to do it, bring in some of the players he wanted to it. There was a time element. I think in the first full year to get to Wembley, elevated everything and hastened it perhaps even quicker than he'd thought it would do. He's not going to get any of that luxury at Warrington. He's been brought in to deliver the Holy Grail, assuming that Steve Price doesn't this year, and that will put him massively in the spotlight. It may be what he wants. Will be interesting to see if how much leeway he gets from the Warrington board and the fans.
And like Phil said, I think Steve Price will stay, because will the Warrington board really want to pay off the fella who's leaving anyway? And in terms of Daryl, I mean, there's lots and lots of players out of contract at Warrington. Will he sort of keep some on? Who will he keep on? Who will he bring in if he's going to bring new people in? And also, who will Castleford go for? Will Castleford go English, or will they look Australia way? Or it's a real sort of big sort of question for Castleford. I think he's more questions at Castleford than there is at Warrington, to be honest with you.
I think Gary's absolutely right on that now. There are quite a lot of players out of contract at Cass as well. They need to get somebody announced and involved in the process of retention and recruitment ASAP. I also think that it says something about relative ambitions, because I think Daryl has realised that there is finite resource at Castleford that there possibly isn't as much at Warrington. And if he is going to build a team in his image, he is going to get some players in either from his current club or wherever he thinks that the gaps are at Warrington. He's going to get the resource to do it. I'm not sure that Cass are in that position at the moment, so I think the spotlight now well and truly is on the Tigers.
And think about Castleford, the difference between Castleford and Warrington. For Daryl to move in, Warrington's got the infrastructure off the field, it's got the ground. Without wishing to offend anyone for Castleford, does Castleford have that? I don't think it does.
We were asked actually earlier on Twitter by a Warrington fan. As he says in his statement, he's totally committed to Cass for the rest of the season. Who will be doing the recruiting at Warrington? I mean, it would be foolish to think that they can't just ask him, but he doesn't work for them yet. It's a strange world of sport and contracts.
Anyway, I don't think he's doing the recruiting at Cass.
I think he'll have a say in the style that he wants to play and the players that he wants. The ones that are out of contract that he wants to keep. It would be absolutely naive to think that there wouldn't be any contact between Warrington and Daryl from now until the end of the season. And that, I think, everybody appreciates that. The only issue will be is if players from Castleford who are still under contract, even if a transfer fee is paid, are approached by Warrington, then that might cause some issues. It's going to be interesting when they meet each other again. I said that both clubs wait until after the first round before announcing it, but some added spice to look forward to when they face each other again.
And in terms of recruitment, I mean, yes, Daryl's not at Warrington yet, but is Lee Brace staying? Is Andrew Henderson staying? Is Aidy Gardner staying? They'll all be there now, so they can play a part in recruitment and retention, ready for the new guy to come in, even if the new guy coming doesn't have to say so on it or the final say. I mean, they'll sort of run people by Daryl Powell's, say, "Oh, do you fancy him? Do you fancy keeping him? What about him? What about him?" But then it doesn't necessarily have to be a case of Daryl sort of only doing recruitment and retention for Warrington. There are people at Warrington that can almost like do it for him.
In some ways, it's a throwback for Warrington as well. It's almost like the recruitment of Tony Smith, I think. Plays a very attractive brand of rugby, gets fans on side because they're exciting to watch. There's just still this question mark of what is the missing ingredient for winning a grand final. I have no idea what it is, and I'm sure they don't know what it is either, because otherwise they would have found it. But it might be the combination of players. It might be bringing in some of the youngsters and actually giving them an extended run. But there will be a massive pressure from day one to deliver on the one thing that, even if they win the Challenge Cup final again, which a fantastic day out at Wembley, hopefully with fans behind them. It's not quite what they want. It's the big one.
You mentioned it before. I mean, Daryl has something that incoming Warrington coaches haven't had for a few years, and that's a decent crop of youngsters to go at. Whereas Warrington have been guilty, perhaps in the past, of not bringing players through their system as much as they should have done. Whereas now it looks like they are doing.
They've also been guilty of having them and not playing them. And I think that Daryl, likes his projects, and he will see some very talented kid who we won't be frightened to throw in and leave in, rather than, put in the squad and withdraw the following week. So, I think he'll be excited by the challenge. It will just be interesting to see the level of pressure that he'll be under from minute one, which he hasn't had at Castleford.
Is Daryl going to move over to Warrington? Because Warrington to Castleford is a bit of a trek, especially when all the traffic's back on the M60.
Well, Tony bought a flat, didn't he, in and around the area? I suspect that Daryl will do the same.
I remember Tony actually lived in Salford, I think.
Yeah, he did actually, near Salford Lads Club. I only know because he used to follow him after press conference in car and wave at him on the motorway.
Well, if he's still got the room, he'll be hiring it out.
Yeah, true, yeah.
So getting over the top bit, that's the problem. Not from one side to the other. Once you're over the other side, that's fine.
So Gary does news. We just pontificate for the sake of it. Who is going to be the next coach of Castleford? If you were a bookie, who would be the front runners?
I'm McDermott.
If I was bookies, but a bookie, I would go one of three. I would include McDermott on that list. I'd also go James Ford or Danny Ward as well. I'd have them three on the list because the home base, and I'm not sure it's because of the restriction of everything. I'm not sure it's the time to go Australian.
Danny Ward's much admired there, I know that. But Danny Orr, perhaps? back in a head coaching role?
If he's offered the head coach's job, I think Danny would go back. I'm not sure he'd go back to do the exact same job he left at Castleford anyway.
I'm not sure he would go back.
I think he would if he was in charge.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, if he was head coach, I think he would go back.
But interesting times.
They can go back to Fev and get James Webster. Worked for them last time.
Yeah.
Probably won't be Shaun Wane, though, because he seemed to rule himself out of, well, the Warrington job this morning and the Castleford job. So
I think he knew he hadn't got the Warrington job. I'm not sure that, you know, sometimes you get a fit with a player or a coach. I'm not sure Castleford is a fit for Shaun Wane. But, of course, Adrian Lamb is out of contracts at the end of this year. Shaun Wane back at Wigan.
You've got Andrew Henderson as well. Like, he was... it was between him and Richard Marshall at Salford. So it's interesting to see how...
Hendo would be great at Cass.
I'd have preferred him at Salford. No offence to Richard. No offence.
You've given him 2 full games.
Yeah.
No, I like Richard Marshall. You know what? Like, think about how... Let's just talk Salford, obviously.
let's talk Salford.
Yeah, Salford's like, they started rubbish last season, didn't they? It's 2 games. You cannot make any judgment on 2 games. It's ridiculous. I see that like Twitter's gone into absolute meltdown already though. Like, Huddersfield have had a great start and Salford have had a great start, you know, so that's it. The season's done. Everyone's made their minds up.
Huddersfield will be all right in the end. If I stop tipping them, which has been their downfall in the first 2 weeks, they'll be okay. It's been an absolute nightmare tipping Huddersfield. But just as you said, Twitter's going to meltdown. Jim White came on my telling. I was just saying those words in his voice. Twitter's in absolute meltdown about Richard Marshall and Salford. I can't do his voice.
No, you ain't.
No, you can't. So I've got a question. And the intelligent people on this call will be able to help with an answer, I think. Have we seen over both hemispheres a bigger disparity in the opening rounds between the very good teams and those who were predicted to be in the bottom of the league? And if that's the case, is that because of the change in the rules, or is there another reason?
Personally, I think certainly in the NRL you've seen a bigger disparity between the teams at the top and the teams at the bottom. But in Super League, I actually think the games have been closer than perhaps a bit more towards the NRL sort of style we're looking at. Like the teams at the bottom are competing more than the teams at the top, and the teams at the top are having to get better and better again.
I do like the theory that the top teams are being dragged down, which is the ones people who have the glass half full, well, quarter full of deciding, oh no, Saints aren't as good as they used to be. So, you know, they're being dragged down to the level of every other team. Whereas, you know, you watch that Saints side and they are just a joy to watch.
And it's a cruel sport. And if you do get a roll on, which is easier under the new rules, it's very, very easy to put back-to-back scores together. But, you know, you looked at 3 of the games this week, you know, Wigan, Saints and Warrington, combined total about 100 points, and the teams that they were playing less than 20. So, again, you know, is that an indication that they've just got better structures, better players, better kids? Is it that they've adapted to the rules a bit more? Do the rules favour because of the momentum that doesn't exist under the Rod Stud principle? Is it just easy to get a roll on under these rules? And do the rules need tweaking to balance out attack and defence a little bit more?
Personally, I think the rules are all right. The only rule I would change back is the ludicrous ball strip rule. I just think that's bonkers.
Do you reckon we're going to get scrums back soon?
I think maybe it might be too late for this year, but probably next year, because if social distancing ends in June, they'll perhaps give it a month to see how it goes when everything's sort of back to as was. Then like Rugby League can look at bringing scrums up, but I think it may be a bit too late in the season for it to do it mid-season. Like teams are used to having no scrums.
I have a feeling we'll bring it back in June if the roadmap rolls out in the way that we've been told it will be. I think it'd be very hard to almost say there is no great need for lack of contact that we've had over the last year and then still not have scrums. So I think they will come back. I just wonder again whether that will make a difference to scorelines. Phil Gould postulated that it was the scrapping of the under-20s that meant that there was a bigger gap. We don't have dual registration, which probably means that some clubs are holding on to their juniors more than they would have done in the past. So those that have the better juniors might have an advantage, and injuries as well. Are we seeing? We talk about it every year. There's a whole load of injuries. Are we seeing any more this year than we have? Is it that clubs can't cope with injuries as well as they've done in previous years?
Personally, I think it's just a knock-on effect of the extended break in that teams are now back into action. It's almost like players' bodies got used to having no full contact or anything. And now they're having full contact. Then injuries could come, and the more intense strain on the bodies may come in, and it sort of causes a bit of an effect. But I don't necessarily think there's been an injury crisis sort of thing. But I mean, it's interesting. But I suppose you could only sort of tell if something like this was repeated again, and hopefully it isn't.
England squad, the latest England squad announced this morning for a training gathering next week. Much consternation that Jake Connor's not in there, despite the fact there's already 4 fullbacks in the squad or something. There's some injured players in there, and this and that and the other, and everyone, people get upset because their favourite player's not in. But Tom Johnson's in, so I don't care anymore because Wakefield at least have got one player in there. It seems, apart from Connor, some saying Truman, it is difficult to pick a squad just based on 2 games, isn't it? But some believe it is.
Yeah, like Shaun said, which is easy for me to say. If he was making changes on the basis of 2 games, it'd be crazy. Do you then pick a squad? If you're going to do that, do you then pick a squad in a fortnight's time and change it all again because someone's had 2 decent games? So he's got to stick with the squad and pick it basically. The one thing he did say that I agree with is that if England were playing on Saturday, Sam Tompkins would be fullback. That is the one thing I agree with, big time. I'd have Sam as my fullback straight off.
We should say congratulations to Ian Laybourne of the Press Association, who is now the chairman of the England selectors, as appointed by Shaun Wane this morning. But it's exciting. 200 days to go. An England squad announced, training next week. We're getting somewhere, Phil. We're getting somewhere ahead of this World Cup.
I just reiterate what Gary said. I think until he gets his original selection of 35 on a field somewhere and can make sure that all the lessons that he's taught them over social media he can start putting into practice, there really genuinely is no point in changing it for change's sake. I think the other thing that he said that I thought was interesting was he wasn't going to play players out of position. It's going to be the best person in every position is going to play. Well, you don't want to stack up 5 or 6 players in one position and then be light in another. And fullback is an area where at the moment it's quite an invidious choice. I think you're right about Sam. When Sam's on, there's so much that he offers to a team. He's got an all-round game, but I just think there's a really interesting question looming about Zach Hardacre, and the question isn't so much aimed at Shaun, it's aimed at Wigan, because if Shaun carries out his intention to not play players out of position and Wigan move Zach Hardacre to centre, is he good enough to break into the England team at centre? Because at fullback he is a different player. He's been absolutely outstanding in the first 2 rounds. He's clearly happier in that role. He's more effective in that role. I think in both of the games that Wigan have played, he's been massive in just offering them that different dimension from the back. So where do you put Bevan French when he comes back? And do you then have an upset Zach Hardacre who's playing in the centre and his chances are lessened of playing in the World Cup? It's really interesting. I thought that was a telling remark from Shaun that he's just going to pick the best player in each position.
But surely as well is there going to be an element of picking players that know how to play for Shaun Wane as well. Know how to win things with Shaun Wane. Sam Tompkins, George Williams, Dan Sargentson. There are a lot of players there who know exactly what is expected of them in those big pressure games. Zach Hardacre is not one of those under Shaun Wane's reign. And also, like, the pressure is England need to win the World Cup on home soil, and he's going to do that with players that have played in a World Cup final before, I think.
I think that was the point about Jake Truman, that there's a lot of intention of he's one of the best young talents we've got, but clearly George Williams is the England number 6. It's going to take something absolutely exceptional to wrest that shirt off him. So again, I think you've got to go with Shaun and just say he's got an idea in his mind who his starting lineup already is.
If you ask Shaun or pin Shaun down, which would be no easy task, to pick a team now, I think his halfback combination would be Lomax and George Williams. Williams at 7, because the move to 7 at Canberra has brought even more out of George than he had at 6 at Wigan for me.
Yeah, either way, I think Jake Truman can't break that partnership at the moment. The other thing we haven't really heard is, when are the England Knights going to be playing, and who are they going to be playing? Because people like Jake Truman does need to be playing at a higher representative level than he is week in, week out. And there's no point, again, Shaun saying, well, he's in the Knights, if the Knights haven't got any matches.
I don't know anything about the Knights, but I really wouldn't be surprised if they played Jamaica again before the World Cup.
It'd be good to think so.
It's Jamaica's warm up anyway. I'm not sure. There might be a case of him playing someone like Greece as well before the World Cup as well. So, but like I say, I'm not saying of any basis of information. I'm just sort of hypothesising here.
I just thought Shaun was interesting as well on basically saying it's the World Cup or bust for him. That he's made no secret whatsoever, both on a national radio phone in. On whenever it was, because I've no idea what day of the week it is, and again in the press conference today, that he doesn't. I don't think he thinks he can do a part-time role with England, but he is looking to get back into club rugby. He's made absolutely no secret of that, and as a head coach, not an assistant. I got the impression that this is it for him. Everybody is quite happy with the arrangement as it exists at the moment. The World Cup's the pinnacle. The RFL, who again, need to rearrange their finances when they know what's coming in, don't have an incessant need to have someone on a high wage for the next 3 or 4 years after the World Cup. So I think this is it for Shaun. Everything is in this basket, and then he's going back to club rugby.
I almost think Shaun's been a victim of circumstance, really. He signed a full-time contract now. If times were normal, the full-time contract would have been needed, because there would have been games to watch every week and meetings and training sessions every month and things like that. Whereas for the last year, he's had nothing. So it's essentially become a part-time job, not because of him, but underneath him, you know what I mean? Like, circumstances conspired to almost make it a part-time job, which sort of leans to me like, I think Shaun will do the World Cup this year, and then maybe stay on as part-time till the next World Cup, which I think suits him perfectly. And also it suits the young talent coming through, like Jake Truman and Harry Newman coming through, because they're perhaps a bit too young for this World Cup, but for the next World Cup they'll be perfect age. And
of course the next World Cup could be in France. That was the other big news last week, that interesting change of philosophy. Whereas under previous regimes it's been, we'll put it out there and anyone can bid for it, and if you can show us a photocopy of your bank statement, you've got it, whether the money's quite there or not. Now it's a strategic decision, and the IRL under Troy Grant are saying, we think that we need to bolster the game in France. It's a very important arm of what we do as a full member. We're going to make representation to the government over there to take the full World Cup to France in 2025. He also went on to say that if it's his personal choice, 2029, it would be in America. And I think that's quite refreshing. I thought when we were on the call with Troy, that suddenly actually saying what's best for the game rather than how much money are you prepared to put up. And secondly, have you actually got it? Seems to me to be a really good move.
No, it's perfect. I mean, I agree with the French one anyway. I mean, because it also opens up the possibility of, I mean, I don't know whether the French A will go for it and B whether they'll think it, but you could sort of have one or two games in Barcelona or San Sebastian, maybe just over the border, but a different country nonetheless.
I think Gemma's in favour because it's just a tour of French patisseries for about 3 weeks.
Oh, and I found a nice wine last time I was there as well. It was a free bottle on a table at Catalan's, and I really enjoyed it.
Always tastes nicer when it's free.
Searching.
I remember all your great photos from Barcelona while I was in Blackpool. I enjoyed that. So,
There's some nice.
I'm missing Blackpool. I am bizarrely missing Blackpool. Not necessarily watching the rugby there, but just going to Blackpool. You don't know. Well, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Just on the England squad, James Roby's back, or he's in there rather. Does he fit the England style more than Josh Hodgson? I'm not saying Josh Hodgson's a bad player or anything, but I almost want to watch him in Australia. He is perfect for their competition, but I almost think when he plays for England, he just looks. And I'm saying that I'm not a bloody expert on the telly. I'm not an analyst or anything, but he almost looks a great player in the wrong team when he plays for England rather than when he's playing for Canberra.
There's two clear types of hooker in Super League and as it is now in the NRL. There's your Josh Hodgson, Michael McIlaurin types, your more nuggety type of hooker. Then there's your running types like your James Roby and your Daryl Clark. So do you have like one of one type or one of the other?
And Shaun was prepared to say if he had to pick a team tomorrow, Sam would be his fullback. I think if he had to pick a team tomorrow, James Roby would be his hooker. Now that might be me because I've always admired James. I think he's got to the status now where we undervalue him because he's so damn good every week. But I just think the new rules as we play them at the moment, which mean more game time for people, more dynamism out of dummy half, more running rather than necessarily clearly there's a minimum threshold for defence, but it's about what you create on attack. I don't think there's anybody better than seeing opportunity out of dummy half, the selection of pass. I think the ability to bring a big player onto the ball. I know that Shaun Wane has a preference perhaps for those that play in the NRL because they're put under more intensity week in, week out. But I just think James Roby's playing as well as I've seen him play. And again, Shaun was saying his stats are ridiculous. He's playing injury free, which he hasn't done for many a while. That is a benefit perhaps of having a longer period of inactivity. I just think he looks fantastic at the moment, and his combination with Alex Walmsley, who you'd have to say is another shoe-in for England at the moment, I'd stick with that.
And the other prop maybe starting Luke Thompson, who he knows from St Helens as well. So it's a perfect fit, really.
Yeah, I think Roby's been you can't say he's been a revelation because he's so good, but I just think that the way we're playing at the moment with the ball in play more, the fact that hookers now are dictating everything and not spending half of their time putting their arms around two of their mates, it's just suiting him. He is he's just an extraordinary athlete, and I would have him in my team at the moment.
I would.
So that's England, I think, sorted. We should have just asked Shaun Wane just to pick his whole team after Sam Tompkins. Right, so who will you pick at number 2? Who's number 3? And gone through it, but
captain.
John Bateman will be his captain, I think.
Yeah, I think so. John Bateman.
I think if you're looking for somebody that embodies Shaun Wane on the field, if you're looking for somebody that knows better than anybody else the message that he's bringing, if you're looking for someone that leads by example rather than by word, which is essentially what Shaun has done in his career, then Bateman is the nearest you'll get to Shaun Wane on the field.
And he's on both sides of the rugby league world now as well. He's a proper poster boy, isn't he? And now he's got his nice new teeth as well.
I think he started the season superbly as well. A bit under the radar. I don't know if people expected him to score 74 tries every game, but again, Wigan haven't fired yet by their own admission. Sorry, Rich, about what they did in the second half against Wakefield, but the two players that have been there when they really needed, well, three if you include Liam Farrell, have been Bateman and Hardacre. Yes. They couldn't have done it without either of them, particularly the first game against Lee, and I think he's been outstanding. The other interesting thing is winger, because I genuinely do think there's going to be a slight changing of the guard, and whereas we would have said Jermaine McGilvery was a shoe-in, where we know Ryan Hall's international record is as good as anybody who's played the game, I think we genuinely are now looking at Makinson and Johnson as our England wing pair, and if that doesn't excite people, I don't know what will.
Do you remember a day in the dim distant past where the England backline pretty much picked itself?
I still think there's some question marks at centre, but Herbie Farnworth, I think, could well be one of them. And then it'd be interesting. Mark Percival remains fit. I think he'd be my other choice. But Oliver Gildart, if he gets back to playing something like he was, he's a Wayne kind of player. Callum's in the mix as well. So there is choice.
What about Zach as well?
Well, that's where it was interesting when he said he wouldn't play people out of position.
But where is his position?
I think it's fullback. I think he's proved the last 2 weeks. It's him and Sam should be fighting it out for first choice fullback. And as a coach, there's every incentive for both of those players to do it week in, week out. And you've got Jake Connor in the background saying, if I can put a consistent run together, don't forget me either. As a coach, that you want to get those 3, 4, 5 people together and go, I'm just picking one of you. You do it every week and make it impossible for me not to choose you.
Yeah, true. Yeah, you've also not mentioned Stephen Ratchford either,
who suffers a little bit from over versatility.
Would you not say that affects Jake Connor a bit as well?
I think Jake Connor now is. He's not going to dislodge Josh Reynolds at 6 for Hull. Provided everybody's fit. The problem at Hull is going to be for Jamie Shaw. How's he going to get back in the team? Because I think Connor is a number one. And I think working under Brett Hodgson, who was one of the most accomplished fullbacks we've seen in this competition, if he can't pick up tips from somebody like Brett Hodgson, then he will end up being one of those immense talents that never settled anywhere. The problem, I think, for Stephen Ratchford is I don't think anybody knows where. Daryl Powell needs to have a quiet word saying, when I come in, you're my, whatever it might be, loose forward, or wherever he thinks he's going to be his best position, and stick him there. And again, Ratchford's suffering from how is he going to break the Austin Widdup axis, because if you're paying so much for those two, I like Widdup when he played 7. I like Ratchford when he played 7.
Yeah, Steph played. I've had a conversation with Steph. I think the only 2 positions he's never played are the 2 props. Because at Salford he played hooker, loose forward, second row.
Yeah, he's probably at the stage of his career where Daryl needs to just say, this is exactly what I need from you in that role. I also think if you're going to bring some kids in at Warrington, Matty Ashton deserves his chance. Now, if his best position is full back, Steph's got to accommodate that at some point, because it's about the next generation as much as it is getting the best out of the current one.
Oh, definitely.
Now we just got to get excited about when Tim Sheens picks his combined amazing All-Star Nations team and see who isn't in that.
Well,
combined nation.
The beauty is, a lot of people whinge about, it shouldn't be picked, It's just a team. We should be playing Wales or Ireland and France, but no disrespect, but to me, that team will be better than Ireland, Wales and France.
Yeah.
Particularly France in the mid-season. They're notoriously bad. Mysteriously, Catalan have had 11 injuries this week, and they're all French internationals.
I absolutely think that there is a change in France at the moment. I think the fact that Trent Robinson is on board even as director of rugby, which means that he probably doesn't need to be there in a hands-on role, because everything can be done by video and statistical analysis these days, that if he's involved, Catalan players will be released. I think he's got a fabulous relationship with Bernard Gouache. I think Capturing him is a massive coup for the French. I don't know if it'll be beyond the World Cup, but I think they've got the coach that they want now. I think, problem with Ottawa is, they don't know when they're going to play or in what competition they're going to be in. Laurent is better employed as the coach of France. His Catalan connection, his connection with Trent. I don't think there's going to be any problem with getting the best players. They'll want to play. In fact, I think they'll be queuing up to play.
There's no problem with getting the best players at the end of the season. The problem's been mid-season because people say, we should. I mean, Sean's actually said he'd like to set up a regular sort of test match with France. Now, France as a mid-season test is ideal, isn't it? But
France away is always a great test.
It is. I've been a couple of times. Everyone, this is as a slight aside. Everyone mentions the crowd in Avignon for that test match we had a few years ago, 17,000. I saw the tickets for the test match in Avignon. There was one word printed larger on every single ticket: gratuit.
It doesn't matter though. I think we worry too much about stuff like that. The interesting thing is that if you had a World Cup in France and that was announced relatively soon, and they're stiffer opposition than they were in the last World Cup in this one, and you look at maybe taking games into Paris and Marseille, where we know there is a crowd with the right event. The very first World Cup final in 1954, 30,000 turned up for that. And that was in Paris. When the tourists from the 1950s came back into Marseille, the streets were lined with people. I think with Trent Robinson on board, it's not just a boost for the French; it's a boost for having a regular opponent that is of value. And I think you allow Wales the time to build up as well. Scotland, if you can get commitment from the likes of Lachlan Coote and another generation coming through, if you can get Bradman Best even for one World Cup to play for Wales because he isn't in the Australian squad, which he may well be, you've got to keep giving them regular internationals. I think the feeling again from the international board was the mid-season window will go, but we'll get an extra week at the end of the season, which might make it easier for everybody to be available. And as Gary said, if the French find it easy to release players at the end of the season and they can have 2 or 3 internationals now because that window is extended, great. Let's get a proper European Championship back.
Definitely. But I mean, I'd still have an England game mid-season. Talking purely as in whether it's an international window or not, I'd perhaps the way of doing it is if there's no formal international window mid-season, keep the Combined Nations All-Star game for mid-season to give because when the Exiles game was first introduced, Steve McNamara said, fans never bought into it and the crowds were pretty small, but the stats on the field actually pointed to it is a level above Super League, which is what's needed to prepare for any international series or a World Cup.
Has Gemma fallen off the sofa?
She has. She's nipped next door.
I'm trying to think of any other news from the last week, and I guess the North American thing has not even launched. It has appeared, drip-fed by our friend Steve Mascott over a few days last week. All these teams who have never existed before and some that have. I'm a cynic. I'm the wrong person to talk about this, but everyone's got excited about it. It's like when, and I always say this, whenever Wakefield have plans for Bellevue or a new stadium or this and that and the other, I always say to everyone, I'll believe it when I'm in it. Not that I don't think it will happen, but once I'm in it, I've had enough false dawns in my life to think, let's wait and see. And this just appears to be another example of something positive appears to be happening in rugby league, so everyone jumps up and down and gets excited about something despite the fact that the substance isn't there. And if you question the substance, as Alan Robinson did, you get called out for it, even though you're asking legitimate questions.
No, I'm with you. I am actually sort of chasing the USARL as to what their thoughts are on it, and how it works with them, because they are the body. Whether they've done a good enough job or not, it's not for me to say, but they are the body that's there. So purely on the run it back as an idea or a theory. It's the right idea for me, the way it should be going. But like anything in rugby league, more questions than answers. How is it going to work? I mean, we're not in a day and age where nice ideas can carry. They need to have serious, full-on backing to get them through. Now, does it have that? Do we even know who's actually behind or responsible for the NARL?
I think there's two things that are positive. One is it appears clubs have had some money put into their bank account. So the fact that we don't really know the provenance of that money is not as important as the fact that it's not a notional thing. It physically exists. I think the other thing is they've announced the first 2 rounds of fixtures. That only came out this afternoon, I think. But that is an indication that there are matches going to be played. It isn't, oh, here's a league, here are going to be some teams in it, and they never get on the field. They're now going to be measured. The June, I think it's 19th, there's one of the conferences starts, the 20th, another conference starts, and the following week. So we've got fixtures, which indicates that teams are at a level whereby they physically exist. I think there are 2 major questions. One is the governance, because unless it is under the USARL as it exists at the moment, then who is going to deal with things like insurance, who's going to deal with disciplinary, who's going to appoint referees, all of those things that are the nuts and bolts of administration. You have to have that as well. You can't just have teams. Then at the moment that is under the auspices of the USARL. It also means that anybody who played for those teams wouldn't be allowed to be selected for America. And surely the intention will be to make the American national team strong, but the USARL control the American national team, and if you're not registered to them, you can't play. It would be pointless having a domestic competition where we're suddenly seeing progress on the field, but it couldn't gravitate up to the national team. The other thing is, where are the players coming from? It's great that there's money. It's great that there's talk of salary caps. It's potentially adverts over in the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere to get players over there. Eddie Pettiborn's signed up today. Great, but there's a big ask to have 14 teams peopled with predominantly players from that continent, because at the moment we are talking about a slightly above community level. There aren't enough to people 14 teams. So where are the players going to come from? All questions which are legitimate. My only reservation, I would imagine Gary's would be the same, is if you're going to make an announcement as big as this and important as this, have a press conference. Put some people up who you can ask actual questions of, rather than put out a press release. Otherwise, all you're doing is inviting scepticism.
Or at least if you're going to put a press release out, at least name people who other journalists can actually chase up and try and contact themselves. I mean, I know the Canadian Rugby League are sort of on board with it, but Toronto Wolfpack, and who owns Toronto Wolfpack? I asked the Canadian Rugby League, and they don't know. Or they certainly don't have a name. So
I thought what was interesting was Simon Johnson tacitly endorsed it by putting out a tweet wishing them luck, which either means he's got some of this detail that we're talking about, or he's in a position to say it's credible. Because I really don't think you'd put your name to something at the moment if you felt it was a competition that didn't have anything behind it. So I think that's a hopeful sign.
I mean, certainly not with what's just happened. You won't put your name to something that's got nothing behind it, would you? So, but I mean, the big thing for me that was missing from the initial press release was there was 2 things: A, who is actually behind it, who is actually in charge of it, and B, do the USARL approve of it? The Canadians were very fulsome in the praise of it, but there was not a word from the USARL.
I think part of the difference is the 2 teams in it from Canada weren't part of the Canadian domestic setup anyway. Whereas a lot of the teams that are migrating to this new competition or keeping a foot in both camps actually are registered under the USARL. So I can understand the Canadian position is we want to foster domestic competition in our country. We don't have any rights over a semi or fully professional element. We want to give them the room to breathe, Whereas in America, it is actually slightly different. Those teams are already allied, and are they coming out of something, or are they asserting themselves in a way that they're going to take over something? It's a little bit more vague, I think, in America.
Well, for me, it's like the clubs still exist. They have two different teams. Like putting it on a more local level, I mean, sort of in the Manchester area, Sale Rugby Union Club still own Haywood Road, where Swinton Lions play. Sale Sharks play at the AJ Bell. They're all part of the same club. They're two separate teams. I'm pretty sure there are other teams. Certainly in Super Rugby Down Under, they have the club teams, the city team, then you have the regional teams, which are part of the Super Rugby team, but they're not completely separate entities. They're sort of amalgamations of the clubs underneath. Whereas like Sale Sharks here are like part of Sale Rugby Union Club. Are the teams that are going to be part of the NARL going to be part of the same club as the ones in the USARL competition? So therefore they've one and the same thing.
All great detail that we do not have an answer for.
Well, today, that's the question.
Are New York still in the Challenge Cup next year?
Are they still hosting the draw?
You still buy the kit though, so that's a positive.
I think New York are going to play at Staley Bridge next year.
Where are Salford going to play when Salford City come in and kick you out? Because that's what everyone keeps saying online.
Not Moor Lane, put it that way. A, it's not big enough, and B, Moor Lane is horrendously packed in. Even now, Moor Lane, I mean, I know because I've done it, but Moor Lane now, Salford City games, the referees park on the school car park next door. I know because I park next to them. That's how little car park is. And also, Moor Lane is 5,000 capacity, which is half the minimum capacity for Super League. And B, it's surrounded by houses and residence parks, so there's no parking around Moor Lane at all.
Sounds like Headingley.
I could say sounds like Headingley, yeah.
No,
I thought I'd get that in before you did.
But London are appearing to move to Wimbledon, so that's a positive. They're off to Plough Lane. So
that. Looks, I've not been, but it looks a really good venue, the new Plough Lane.
One thing they've got is a huge ability to sell corporate. Now, clearly, you need to be playing perhaps at the highest level, and you need to get awareness, greater than it perhaps has been for a while because they've been so nomadic. But should they manage to get corporate support, they've got a great facility now to offer something on a match day, which is part of the way sport works these days.
In a way, the way sport works, particularly football, fans come last. If you budget on purely on fans' takings, you're in trouble.
I think it would be remiss at this stage not to come to Richard on Wakefield.
What about us?
Well,
I'm speaking as a non-employee now, so I'm my zip is removed from my mouth.
I think it's safe to say that we're all fans of Chris Chester as a bloke. I think he's been as outgoing and helpful as anybody you'd want to meet in the game. But did you find some of his comments post-match against Wigan slightly concerning in that he was talking about passengers in the team? He was mentioning attitude being an issue. Is the threat for Chris Chester from within rather than without? Bearing in mind that virtually everybody is fit at the moment, but he's got two assistants now working for him who, could quite easily become head coaches. The record of 7 wins in 29 speaks for itself. I'm not saying that's all Chris's fault at all, but he's a pretty lugubrious guy anyway. At the best of times when he's in the media, he just seemed more despondent than I'd seen him for a while.
The numbers don't lie, do they? That's the problem, and people can always bring those up because the record is not good. Certainly not since those 2 seasons of almost getting into the playoffs. The line about passengers is interesting, isn't it? Because it's something he said in various ways over the past couple of seasons.
Yeah.
But has there been a massive turnover of players leaving? I don't think there has been, but that might be just because there's not enough money to bring quality replacements in, because as with every club at the minute, everyone's under financial pressures. I was very surprised when they announced Andy Laster's coming in. Not so much will he poach him because he's been an assistant everywhere, and I'm not pigeonholing him as an assistant. I don't know how good he would be as a head coach, but he's never been given that chance, so we don't know. Whereas Andy Last, from all we saw last year at Hull, seemed to do a decent enough job. It was a surprise then that he would take an assistant's job. I mean, I'm not saying in his thoughts he thought one day perhaps I might get the big job there, but it certainly looks like that from the outside, doesn't it? It's almost bringing somebody in to replace you, in a sense.
I mean, but
that's just my opinion.
I'm not aware of Wakefield's accounts or anything like that, but I mean, how long is Chris Chester contracted for now?
That's a question I don't know the answer to, which I should do, shouldn't I? But I think he signed a deal like a year or so ago, didn't he?
And if so, can Wakefield afford to pay him off?
He's obviously got a very good relationship with the chief executive.
Can Wakefield afford to be relegated? And when does it become a concern?
Well, this is a question I've sort of asked myself. If Wakefield are relegated, would they be allowed back in Super League with the ground as it is now?
I wouldn't have thought so. That's why I think they cannot afford to be relegated. Because I don't know whether they'd come back if they were. And we don't know how the Challenge Cup's going to go this weekend, because it's even harder to draw a form line after the 2 rounds that we've seen, the amount of injuries. But there's a likelihood on what we've seen so far that Castellan will beat Wakefield on Saturday. If you were a bookie, I think the Dragons would be favourites. There may not be a lot in it, but I think if Wakefield's season is halved after this week in what they can realistically aim for, then I think that will heap more pressure on Chris.
I mean, when I was working at the club, I left the Facebook groups, the supporters Facebook groups, because the lack of, not awareness, but reality of the situation.
Yeah.
We're talking about a club who are obviously not hand to mouth, that's the wrong phrase, but they're not spending money they don't have to.
No.
And they're doing things not as cheaply as possible, because then that can be construed the wrong way, but they're doing the best they can with the resources they have. And obviously in the last 12 months, those resources have been stretched even further because there's no one coming in through the gates and no one in the bars, the same as everyone else. It's the worrying fact is they didn't kick on from those 2 seasons when we were close to getting into the top 4 or 5, whatever it was at the time, and have gone backwards. And it's trying to work out the reasons why. You know, I wasn't a fan of bringing in Scott Griggs because I thought he would keep Max Jowett from progressing as much as he could. I am a fan of Danny Brough, but in hindsight, I don't think that was the right signing. But he's gone now.
You mentioned before Wakefield going backwards. Do you not think it's a case of other teams going further forwards than what Wakefield have?
It may well be as well, yeah. I mean, you could say that Wakefield just had a couple of freak years, and I think that would be fair enough to describe as well. Salford obviously have had a great couple of seasons. Huddersfield, you're never quite sure what they're going to be, are you? Those teams at the bottom end, Huddersfield, are probably unfair to call them that, but maybe one year it's Wakefield, the next year it's Salford, the next year it's Hull KR have a good season or 2. It's trying to keep up that momentum and trying to keep your best players, and for the most part, Wakefield have kept hold of their best players. The crown jewel is still there in Tom Johnston when he's fit.
Bryce Johnston's still there.
It is a surprise, isn't it? And I guess, is anyone willing to pay a transfer fee? Because obviously he's got a long contract, and his agent and the club have done a very good job in upgrading his contracts year in, year out. Are clubs worried about his injuries? I don't know.
No, that's your asset in the bank, I think. Whilst ever you've got a financial holdout, she's back. Whilst ever you've got a financial holdout over Tom Johnson, he is your asset. But I just, something didn't seem right in the second half against Wigan. And again, I'm totally contradicting myself in saying you shouldn't read too much into 2 weeks. But, you know, with the greatest respect to Wigan, particularly in that first half, they're not firing on all cylinders at the moment, and they can't be expected to because of the injuries that they've got. But at 6-6, you felt maybe it's there for Wakefield to perhaps step up or be competitive. To concede 5 tries in the second half, lose by 30 points, and then the coach come out and say there's some passengers in my team. I think that's it's almost an amber light. It's not red yet, but there are certain teams, of which one I might be known to be slightly allied to, have got a ready-made excuse if they want by saying they haven't got players out there. Wakefield have got virtually a full team, and something was missing. Something is missing.
But as you say, it's 2 weeks since the season, yes, but it's 2 weeks added on to the previous. That's the. It's putting together a run. They can't seem to put together a run at the minute.
No, definitely. Well, they can put together a run. They can put together losses. But
what are their fixtures like after the cup tie?
In fairness, when the fixtures came out, I was worried for the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. I'm now trying to find them. I wouldn't tip us to beat Catalans at the weekend.
No, but I think if you've got games coming up against Lee and Hull KR, then it's a defining part of the season.
Those will be. I'm trying to navigate the website now. I wish websites were easier to navigate. Or it might just be my age. So after the exciting break, we've got Wigan again. Oh no, hang on. Oh, it's gone to the Super League website instead of. Oh. Bear with me, caller.
It's all right.
Team.
How's the neighbour?
Sorry, I had a very important delivery to make to 2-year-old Ellis. I'd bought him a little bumblebee for the garden because he keeps stealing mine.
He does.
So I needed to drop it off because he kept trying to FaceTime me. Sorry, folks.
Start him young over the other side of the pen lines. So after the
kids in Manchester stealing bumblebees at 2-year-old. What took him so long?
After the Challenge Cup, it's the easy test of St Helens away.
Oh.
Followed by Hull FC away.
Like, typically, they'd probably win that.
Followed by Catalans at home. You can never predict the Catalans. Followed by Leeds away, again, brackets, even though it was at home. Then Hull KR at home. But that's on the 23rd of May, which seems like a long, long way away, doesn't it? It's not a pleasing fixture list.
Is it almost a stage where teams, and I include Sophie's, have to almost target fixtures like, let's say Sophie v Wakefield, we need to win that one. Whereas if they almost like get games against like Wigan and St Helens and Leeds, you say, if we win it, great. If we don't win it, well, it's not unexpected. You know what I mean?
I think what teams are going to have to decide is they're going to have to protect their better players. And I use better respectfully because I think anybody who plays this sport is sensational. But clearly you have people in your squad that you build your team around a little bit. So it may well be that Wakefield would say, well, if we've got to beat Hull KR in May, we've got to make sure that, Jacob Miller has to play, David Fafita has to play, Tom Johnson has to play. If that means we're not going to play them against St Helens or Hull, we have to make that decision. So I think you're right that it's targeting in the sense of we've only got limited resource, and when we play the games we have to win, we have to have our best players out there.
I think that'll come in later in the season when we got midweek games as well. So now I think you can early in the season. I think you can get away with it when it's just like one game a week. Whereas when you got midweek games, well, I think that really will come in when you like targeting fixtures really.
I just want us to win a game. Can we win a game soon? Take the pressure off. And it's the same for every club, isn't it? While you've got the 0 next to your name, you just want to get that win on the board.
Yep, you do.
Is there any other news before we talk about actual rugby?
World Cup tickets back on sale today.
They are on sale. 200 days to go. I'm excited.
And
I'm looking forward to it.
Certain games that are already near to sellouts.
Excellent.
Very encouraging. And also, I've been told that I've written it before. A lot of the decision whether the tournament actually goes ahead on schedule rests largely on the shoulders of the Australian New Zealand government. That's how their vaccine rollout works. But also a big step forward is New Zealand has announced a travel bubble with Australia to start in April, which is a massive step forward to actually getting the tournament going ahead on schedule.
Yeah, I think it will go ahead on schedule. I think we may well have some venues that have full crowds. I think perhaps some of the bigger venues there might need to be a little bit of segregation, but there'll be interesting debate, as there will in the rest of society, about will there be a need for a vaccination passport to get into the bigger events with more people. That's an ethical issue that I don't think we probably need to or want to discuss on here.
I think at St James's Park, not Wetherspoons.
I think it will go ahead. I think there's a real will within the government. I think Oliver Dowden doing the Challenge Cup draw is another indication that they've targeted this event at the end of the year that's going to help everybody move to the next phase. So I'm pretty confident that teams will come over. There may be an issue about fans tours from the Southern Hemisphere, but the bulk of the crowd is going to be from here anyway. And I think if people aren't going on traditional summer holidays, they're saying, right, well, I want to be part of an event and I'll buy a ticket for Arsenal or Old Trafford or St James's Park, and quite confident. Just something else to throw into the mix. We sort of mentioned how well organised this World Cup has been. Yeah, ally that to there's a desire to have the next one in France as a strategic possibility. What about employing the current World Cup team to become that's their job, that they spend the next 3 years building up to the next World Cup, and they are the deliverers of 2025 in France, that John Dutton and the key personnel stay in place, that we find a way of keeping them within the sport. We don't get a Sally Bolton goes to tennis or whatever it might be. And the legacy isn't just the facilities that are being built over here, but we've got a group of really professional people who can deliver the next World Cup and maybe the World Cup after that. I
think certainly if it goes France and North America, that sort of plays into keeping the likes of John Dutton on, because it's not going Southern Hemisphere, which means it'll more than likely come under the NRL's remit. But I think so. I mean, I'd certainly keep John involved, definitely, whether it be as boss of the World Cup in future or boss of Super League or whatever. I'd certainly keep John involved, definitely.
I was going to say something now, and I can't remember what I was going to say about the World Cup. Oh, yes, that's it. As long as we all behave and don't say get photographed in a clubhouse drinking beer and watching rugby on the telly, we might be all right. We might be all right.
Might be. All right.
Just stay calm. You can go to the pubs in a few weeks. I don't know.
Yeah.
People.
You can go outside in the snow next Monday.
Yeah. If only the Fev fans had built a beer garden instead of a stand. People think I'm picking on Fev. I'm not picking on Fev. I'm picking on idiots. The championship was back last week. Featherstone beat Batley 28-18. But their young winger did a try like Tom Johnston. You could just about see it on the corner. Oldham beat Swinton 28-20. Halifax is thrashing the right word, 47-14 over London. Toulouse beat York 21-6. Dewsbury beat Whitehaven 17-8. And on Sunday, a draw. Newcastle and Widnes, which didn't look likely at 1 point, 30-all. And Sheffield Eagles, what a performance. 50 points to 12 over the Bradford Bulls. So certainly some interesting results in the championship in the first week. For all those that watched them, I didn't watch any of them because I'm not paying any money.
No, the Oldham result impressed me because Swinton had put together some decent results. I watched Oldham. I actually watched Oldham twice already this year. I watched them at Featherstone in the friendly, and I watched them against Barrow in the Challenge Cup. And the Oldham looked a team that played well in patches but couldn't string it together for the whole game, whereas it looks like they did against Swinton. So I'm quite impressed with that result.
Fantastic result for Toulouse. I think we've got a lot of respect for what's physically and as a side being built at York. Be really interesting to see them against Wigan this week. Just because I think York want to be back in the big time. They're going about it the right way. This is a real big time fixture for them. But for Toulouse to go there with very little preparation time, a friendly against the Dragons, and some new players who hadn't ever played for them before. I think, again, to fly in and get the result, that's a really big one. Bradford a disappointment, really, on the basis of the fact that I think it shocked John Keir. Looking at his post-match press conference, he was just saying this isn't a team, didn't look like a team that's coached by me. Again, a lot of expectation of going back to Odsal, new regime behind the scenes. It may well be that it's going to be a year where they'll find their feet in the Championship, but I don't think any of us expected 50. Particularly from a Sheffield team who, again, are in that sort of rebuilding phase and waiting for their new facility to come on board, and didn't expect too much. So yeah, don't read anything much into week one, but a couple of real standout performances.
People, by the way, I wasn't smiling when you were talking about Bradford getting thrashed. It's just I've got Sky Sports News and they show the montage of Daryl Powell, obviously talking about his move, and it was just shots of him on the touchline remonstrating with officials and waving his arms around and looking depressed. It was quite amusing. He wasn't smiling or anything on any of the shots.
Hanging out at Bog Window at one of the games, that was my favourite. All the shots stormed across the pitch.
Yeah, that was the
favourite. Someone needs to, if you're listening, someone do that for social media, please. I love that.
It was Greg Eden he had a go at on the pitch, wasn't it?
I do like
it. He'll do that with Greg English next season. I look forward to it.
Good luck with that.
I understand there were some issues with the streaming of the Sheffield Bradford game. This is going to be an issue, a problem in so much as it happened with the ice hockey at the weekend as well. They've invented this tournament to fill in a gap. Obviously, behind closed doors, charging people per game to watch. Too many people wanted to watch Sheffield Steelers versus Nottingham Panthers. So it broke their systems. They had to put it on YouTube for free, causing much consternation between people. So it's not just rugby league people moaning that everything goes wrong. Ice hockey is the same as well, and everyone wants their money back, and this and that and the other.
On Twitter, it happens in football. It
happens all the time.
Everybody's learning in these unprecedented times. A year on.
The BBC lost Fev and Bradford, didn't they? And everyone got upset about it.
Do you know what I've decided is missing on the Carter's view? You know Gogglebox? We all watch Gogglebox. We love it. Where's the tray of cakes in front of the two of you?
Well, I have to keep coming off camera because I have to keep nipping off like I've just nipped off to put oven on for his tea.
What we're having tonight? The listeners need to know.
54.
Well, I've got a choice because as the big shop came this morning, so normally you're lucky if you've got some milk in the fridge, you know. I tell you what, though, I'm sick of cooking.
Well, don't cook. Then get a takeaway.
No, I can't.
Get Papa John's on. They might send you a free pizza when we tuna on. Sam Tompkins' favourite.
No Papa John's around here.
There's no Papa John's in Super League anymore, I don't think.
Oh, is there not?
No.
Is there not?
No, not at the minute.
Oh, I love the Papa John's in press box.
I did enjoy. Don't tell Sam Tompkins. I did enjoy people getting upset that England is sponsored.
I liked that one. Just saying. I
did enjoy
all the flavours.
People got upset that England have been sponsored by Monster because there's nothing actually that can sponsor anyone without people getting upset. So energy drinks, even though they're not energy drinks, they're bad. Bookmakers, they're bad. Cigarettes are bad. Beer is bad. What's going to sponsor us? I don't know.
It's stuff you stay in fences with, bad.
Made up social media platforms.
Only if you drink it.
I am enjoying all.
Seal and Monster, to be honest.
There was something I was going to mention before I mentioned the Super League games, and it must have been to do with food, and I've completely forgotten what it was. Yeah. My brain is not working. It's because I've had a year of not working. Now I'm kind of back working. It's throwing off my schedule of not doing anything. I can't watch TV all day and things. In Super League, we briefly mentioned Wigan and Wakefield, so I don't need to mention that again. Apart from Tommy Luluai, he's not up before the beak, so another thing for Chris Chester not to be happy about.
Tommy was never going to be.
He's a smart man. St Helens 25, Hull KR 0, and the worst for Hull KR is Elliot Minchella's out for the season. And they still haven't got their star sign. He's still not fit, is he, for this week? So they're struggling at the minute.
Hull I mean, losing Minchella for the season will be a massive blow. So much bigger blow than being nilled by St Helens, because St Helens will nil plenty of teams this year. The thing with Takarangi, I mean, it's almost like an open-ended thing now, isn't it? Is it going to be next week? Is it going to be the week after? Is it going to be the week after that? Now, people could say, oh, it's a similar thing with English, but to me, Takarangi is more vital to Hull KR than English is to Warrington.
Yeah, I'd go with that. I think, again, they've gone with a smaller squad this year in the hope that they'd have their best players out on the field most weeks, and hasn't really fired for that. I think if you were Tony Smith, you'd be relatively pleased with the first 2 weeks. You'd be really annoyed that you threw the game against Catalan away, that you'd worked so hard to get back into that you basically couldn't defend one set of 6 when we went to Golden Point extra time. But I think they'd used up so much energy to get back into the game that maybe that cost them. I think you're right about St Helens. You know, there are so few teams, particularly towards the bottom of the league, that are going to be able to break them down this year. The nil would concern him a little bit. I think that, you know, I think you want to see signs that your attack is working. But no, I think they've still got things that they can confidently build on there.
Unless you want to throw anything else in about Wigan and Wakefield, I mean, I can mute myself if you want to. No. As mentioned at the start of the programme, Warrington, of course, who were rubbish in week 1, are now great again, having beaten Lee 44-12. So everything's good in the Primrose and Blue.
I don't think it was so much that they were great, because I think, with the greatest respect to Lee, it was a massive ask to ask them to play Wigan and Warrington in 6 days. But what you can say is that Gareth Widdop definitely had his best game in a Warrington shirt. I don't know if they tweaked something and said, at this point, Widdop is in charge. At that point, Austin's in charge. But they actually look like a much more integrated outfit. And I think Widdop really enjoyed himself. The longer the game went on, the more he wanted to get involved, the more impact and influence he had. Whether the two of them can regularly play together, I don't know. I think that's now Daryl Powell's problem. Although, is Austin off contract at the end of the year?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, and I think Widdop might be as well. So, you know, there's some interesting debate there that they can have. But they looked a more fluent team, put it that way.
They did. I mean, I actually asked Steve Price after the game. I said, when your left side, like Widdop, Toby King and Tom Lynham, do that well, how do you bring Greg English into the left-hand side? He went, it was a pain. He mentioned a couple of times actually how well the right side did as well. So I think, certainly with Widdop, you're going to see more performances like the one against Lee than the ones you saw last year, because there were a lot of extenuating circumstances behind Gareth Widdop last year. Whereas this year's a lot more focused. He's sort of purely focused on his rugby. And I think you're likely to see a much better Gareth Widdop this year than last year.
Looking forward to the next Brian Bevan podcast when they have to talk about Daryl Powell, because obviously they love Steve Price's tactic of just kicking it to Toby King. That was followed on Friday, Good Friday, it seems so long ago. Castleford Tigers beating Leeds. I can't believe I didn't realise that Daniel Smith and Cameron Smith were brothers. I didn't realise this until Friday. I don't know why I'd missed this, but I had. Not that it matters. But an entertaining game, Phil, and Leeds are doing it tough at the minute. I have to put this qualifier in there, but Castleford, just slightly the better team on the day.
Yeah, I don't think there were any complaints from either side. Cass were pretty much dogged. I think their concern would be that they couldn't keep the initial intensity going. So the first 20 minutes they were outstanding, and then for the second 60 minutes, Leeds actually probably matched them until the try at the end. But there were some signs there that particularly Jake Truman and Ollie Holmes have started the season like a house on fire, and they look brilliant. The saving grace for Leeds is the fact that although some of their kids took some ridiculous criticism on social media, which again, if you want to sit behind a keyboard and throw criticism at 18-year-olds way, I think that says more about you than the performance of the 18-year-old. Some of the they need the experience that they're getting. and the Maguires and the Burrows and the Sinfields, they all played in teams that got beat in the early part of their career and came off frustrated that they could have done more. But it was a learning process, and once they had learnt those lessons, they found a formula where they won more often than they lost, and particularly in the bigger games. I thought Leeds hung in there really well considering the personnel they had out there. Myler withdrawing. I think there's a danger that another major back might not play this weekend either, which will literally probably have them ringing for Scoey, because I think he's next in line.
I mean, they could call Brett Ferris, but they can't now.
I don't think he can play in the halves. That's the only thing. I think they're reluctant to put Kyle Eastman in at St Helens against St Helens, so they're going to struggle until they start getting some names in the backs back. But the forwards were a pretty solid group, and in the likes of Matt Pryor, they've got somebody who's going to make sure that the standards don't drop. The thing I like about Leeds at the moment is when they're bigging players off the bench, they're actually adding. With a couple of clubs, the intensity is dropping. But everybody who's come off the bench in the first two games, I think has increased the viability of the whole. And Cruz Lehman had a really good game against Cass. So yeah, they'll be disappointed they didn't beat their neighbours from down the road. But there was plenty to be pleased with, I think.
Yeah, I think Castleford Leeds game is a game where both coaches can be happy. Daryl can be happy at how, like Ollie Holmes and Jake Trim, but also how Niall Evans and Jordan Turner have slotted straight into a new club as if they've been there for years. And like Phil said with Leeds, I think Richard Agar can be impressed with how his side sort of held in there without many of their big name players in pretty much one area as well. So he'll sort of take hope from when the first team players are back, like Rob Louie and people like that, they can add that bit of class to their work, where the work rate can't be faulted at all. Whereas the players that are coming back in can add that little bit of polish to it. And Rich can really sort of take heart from the work rates there, but the polish is to come from when the injured players return.
I think the emergence of Jack Broadbent is a massive plus for Leeds. Okay. He came through the junior ranks as a standoff, and his two games this year have been centre and fullback, and he's looked incredibly accomplished. And as a sport, we want to laud the kids that are coming through at any team, and I think he has set an early marker this year.
I mean, if something goes wrong with the World Cup and a team can't turn up, I'm going to set up my own country, much like the Americans have done their own governing body. So I've got my own we're called Other England. We're not England officially, we're Other England. Niall Evans and Ollie Holmes are straight in that squad because they're not going to get in Shaun Wane's squad, but they're good enough to be in a different squad.
Niall Evans is in the England squad.
But I don't think he'll start ahead of Tompkins and every other fullback, sadly for him, because he's been superb the first 2 weeks.
He has. He was brilliant at Salford as well. I mean, the best thing Niall Evans did at Salford was defensively against Castleford. Actually, do you remember he charged down? Was it Greg Eden charging down the left wing, and Niall sort of charged across the field and tackled him into touch? That's the best thing I've seen Niall Evans do that.
I think the other thing about Niall Evans, which is one of the reasons he went to Cass, was to work under Daryl. It's a shame that it's only going to be for a year. Was that Daryl said after the first game it was his pass selection that was the most impressive thing. They know he can back up. They know he can score tries. They know he can pull off try-saving tackles. But under Daryl, he's already got another dimension to his game. And again, Niall Evans has prospered, I think, from being in a different environment where he's being given license to do what he does best. It's a shame for him that the guy who's bought him and has elicited that from him isn't going to be there next year.
But he's not under a long-term deal at Cass, is he?
Well, he's supposed to have signed an extended deal. I don't think it's been announced formally yet.
Right. It's one of those things out right. That's fair enough. Because I know he was asked about it in the pre-season press thing, and I can't remember what he said, but
give me the month, I think he said.
Fair enough then. Don't have to. I won't link him with Warrington then. Now. That's
but don't mention Niall Evans in front of the Salford fans.
Should I not mention the game on Saturday either? I mean, I didn't watch Salford versus Hull because Dumbarton were on the telly and I watched that instead. Yeah. But it sounds like I didn't miss much, apart from Jake Connor obviously becoming the world's greatest fullback, at least until Huddersfield played Catalans. But Hull, They've started quite well under Brett Hodgson.
No, they definitely have. I mean, the thing that for me is that the impact that Brett Hodgson's made from an early stage as well. It's not been a building thing; it's been pretty much immediate. And also, all I've always had what he takes on the ball. It's more off the ball now that he's sort of improving Hull in defence as well. You really sort of see a big effort in defence early doors in the game under Brett Hodgson. I'm impressed with the job he's done so far.
What I like about Brett Hodgson is he seems to have identified who his 17 are.
Yes.
He's got the right players in the right positions, and there seems to be a lot more solidity about them. So there's some names that aren't playing at the moment, but I think he said, look, my pack, I want it to look like this. I want it to operate like this. I want you to play a certain amount of game time. I want you to play in a certain way. It seems to be working. They've got a discipline about them that maybe they haven't had in previous years.
No, definitely.
Sorry, Gemma keeps... I keep thinking she wants to say something revelatory about Salford.
Right. So obviously we're on my phone recording this, and I'm getting a stream of messages through. So I'm trying to keep them, but I was trying to keep them off camera, so you probably got me going.
Tell us about Salford, though.
Pardon?
That was about Salford.
You tell them about Salford, guys.
Salford, I mean, you can almost sort of discount the St Helens game because St Helens are sort of that good. I mean, I was a bit concerned that certain things happened in the whole game. Mainly how Salford were shooting themselves in the foot time and time again. I think the first big decision Richard Marshall needs to make is who is his fullback. Is it Dan Sargent or is it Morgan Esquire? That's the first big decision for me he needs to make. And also, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure Elijah Taylor tackles his alarm clock before doing anything in the day at all. He breaks out 1 million tackles a game.
He is one of the unsung great imports this year.
Definitely.
In the first 2 games.
I mean, Salford fans, Salford are 2 losses from 2, but I think they've shown there are sort of signs there that they can and will improve. I think there's certain areas of the team that Richard Marshall needs to decide, right, you're my fullback, you're my centre, you're my back rower. But again, he's a new coach. He needs to see all his players and how they react in games. So I think give it sort of another 4 or 5 games before you start judging on Richard Marshall as a coach.
So the people on social media, they don't give anyone any time, let alone weeks. They always pick on the wrong people, though. They don't pick on people who deserve to be criticised. I know we're supposed to be kind to everyone, but some people don't deserve it.
It's just an echo chamber, isn't it? I've kind of come off it, to be honest. So I'm still loitering in the background, but just
like some Super League coaches who claim they're not on but are. Yeah.
Same old.
Yeah, definitely.
And the week ended in Super League, at least, with Huddersfield losing to Catalan Drag. I mean, obviously, Ian Watson's reign not sadly well, but in fairness, they haven't had Aidan Season for the first couple of weeks. He's pretty much their star player, so we can forgive them that.
It's not only is he their star player, but he's their star player in one of the most important positions on the park as well. I think you can notice perceptibly that Huddersfield have changed a little bit as well. That it's going to take a tiny bit of, it's going to take some time in a game situation for them to understand and appreciate what Ian Watson wants from them. But I think he can see some signs that it's coming. Catalan's still an interesting one for me because, week 1, a lot of young French players were all getting excited about that generation coming through. Week 2, let's throw some of the more familiar names in there. I'm absolutely convinced when Michael McAlorum comes back, that's Alrix Da Costa out of the team. And I don't know. I love watching young French players express themselves. I think Arthur Morgue doesn't need to be coming off the bench playing as a backup hooker. I just love to see him playing in that team, and there clearly is some young French talent there that's desperate for a go. But no, they've looked pretty solid. I think discipline's still an issue for the Dragons. Great that again, they were prepared to give up home advantage in the cup to make it a double header this weekend. They didn't have to do that. Clearly, if they could have played that game in Perpignan, I'm sure they would have preferred to have done and had somebody come and visit them and on a short turnaround. So you wish them well. But no, I think those are two teams that have got a lot left in them. Although I do think that people like Sam Cassiano seem to be putting in bigger minutes this year and making a bigger impact.
I've been impressed with how Castleford have won because they've won in very different fashions, the two games. The first one was very built on the young French talent, whereas the second one, I'm pretty sure Dean Farage knows he's still bleeding, isn't it?
I love him as a player.
You fly over for a game, you land a couple of hours before, you lose three or four players to cuts. I think it was one stage where Mike Russell was on manning the washing machine at St Helens, wasn't it? And then you come out of that and still win. I mean, that shows that you've got the character, what it takes to win for me, to do that. And then the first one showed they've got the talent in depth as well with the young French lads coming in to win that way. So I think Steve McNamara can take a lot from the first two games, really.
I've just checked the TV guide and it says this is BBC 2, 4:30 on Saturday. Mark Chapman presents live coverage of what promises to be a fascinating encounter. I tell you what, if it's not fascinating, I'll be turning over to the Grand National after about 10 minutes, but at least I've got that choice.
Described as fascinating because no one quite knows what they're going to produce.
Fascinating game chosen by the BBC. They could have put Fev and Hull on, they could have put all, Hull Carcass, but they've chosen the mighty Wakefield, back on the telly. I can't wait. I'm assuming the viewing figures were down this week because we haven't had a press release from Super League telling us how great they were. I shouldn't have said that. I didn't mean it. Oh.
Is dinner ready? Have you just been and checked?
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. Someone's trying to ring me. I know we shouldn't have recorded this on my phone. I've lost you both now.
I can see. We can see you.
Yeah, I might need to go soon. Sorry.
Well, I think we're done. I think we're done. I don't think there's anything else. I think we've spoken about everything, haven't we?
I think the last word should go to Gemma because I don't think she's had enough airtime.
Well, before Gemma's last word.
Clean.
No, it's just a little bit too early. I like Silent Assassin. Come back to me at mid-season.
Before we go, people should read Gary's article in the current 4020 magazine because he makes a lot of good points about media coverage of rugby league. And I've been from my previous life, long been a supporter of having the radio bit separated from the press bit. But clubs don't want to do that because they just want to get it all done in one bit. But makes far too much sense, Gary, which is almost good to read.
Concerning.
I think we're done, aren't we?
Yeah, it's lovely to see you both.
Good to see you.
And so, one day I might, get to a game and I'll bring you raffle prizes. That'll be exciting.
Oh yeah.
I think if this podcast was 5 minutes longer, Phil Kaplan would be blinded by the sun.
I know.
It started off with snow and now the sun's come out.
I know.
Something about the righteous, but
before here as well.
On that quite bombshell, Gary, Gemma, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Gemma, you could get a job working for Boris Johnson as an IT consultant with your skills getting us on the air today. So congratulations for that.
Sorry I didn't contribute much either.
Okay, you've been busy sorting out bees and stuff and dinner. You've got to feed him.
See you in the press box with chocolate, maybe Saturday.
Oh, I've got a lot of chocolate I need to get through as well. So yeah.
Yeah. See you then.
I'll be there.
Well, you two enjoy St Helens. I'll be watching on the telly and just chuck some rappers behind Brian Noble and whoever's on the telly.
All right, well.
We'll be back again next week as we look back on the Challenge Cup and those fascinating ties here on 4020, not live.